City of Stevens Point Historic Preservation Design Review Commission meeting, recorded November 25, 2024.
I call the Historic Preservation Design Review Commission meeting to order at 5. Adam, roll call.
Siebert is excused. Monk?
Here.
Christensen?
Here.
Kalnan?
Here.
Malevsky is excused, and Finn is excused. We have a quorum.
Alrighty. So, So discussion possible action on report of the October 30th, 2024 meeting of the Historic Preservation Design Review Commission. Do we have a motion to accept?
I will motion.
All right.
I will second.
All right. Any discussion?
Motion to approve? Just
Motion to approve, yes.
Yep. And then
Yep.
second, and then any discussion? No. All right. So all those in favor say aye.
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 You can vote, Janet, so I know you just came in. If you don't want to, you're
Okay.
okay.
All those against? All right. So then we'll move on to discussion and possible action on item number 3, the public hearing and action on a request from the City of Stevens Point to adopt the Stevens Point Historic Preservation Plan consistent with Chapter 220632A. So, Adam?
All right, thank you, Peter. So the memorandum included in the packet kind of summarizes the efforts that were born out of this commission over the last year and a half or so. You know, as folks on the commission recall, originally the thought of this historic preservation plan was born out through some certified local government grant funding that was offered through the state. As part of that, as part of such efforts to obtain that grant funding, we had to obtain some quotes for the scope of services from qualified firms. Those quotes that came in ultimately became more than what we could get as a city from this grant application. Those conversations ultimately allowed us to revert back to, you know, should we continue the project for creating this plan through us in-house, or should we just scrap the project and utilize our time elsewhere? This commission ultimately decided to work internally on creating this plan. So really the last year or so, dating back to December, has been a pretty lengthy process, starting with the public participatory phase early in the late fall, winter, and early spring of 2024, followed by some public outreach and walking tours in the spring, followed by the actual drafting of this proposed plan that's before you, and then these last couple months being spent fine-tuning the document amongst yourself as a commission, our plan commission, and then community stakeholders as well. So the packet kind of outlines, again, just a brief summary of what this plan is, its purpose, and what it entails. You've heard me talk about that over the last few months, so I won't touch on that. What I will say, just for logistics, ultimately the request is before you to adopt said plan. Should you choose to approve of the plan, it would merely be that of a recommendation. It would be brought before the Plan Commission on December the 2nd for their consideration as required by local ordinance. Should they recommend approval as well, it'll be brought before the Common Council on the 16th of December for final action. Last thing I'll say is, should this plan be adopted, I do want to begin in earnest to fulfill some of these recommendations. So expect probably the next time we'll meet, we'll have more of a lengthy conversation about which specific policy recommendations we want to tackle first and foremost. So I don't want this to be a plan that just sits on a shelf and gets forgotten over time. So with that, I will kick it back to the chair. We'll kickstart the public hearing and then take it from there.
All right, so I'll declare the public hearing open. All those wishing to speak, please step up to the lectern and just give your name, address, and what you'd like to say.
Hi, I'm Christina Lorge. I live at 2025 Main Street in Stevens Point. I've been living in the home I'm in for about 7 years. I'm not in favor of this plan at all for the following reasons. One, I'm a history major. I appreciate history. I appreciate preserving history. There's beautiful homes in Point. There's things like that. But a mass annexation of homes in Point seems to me to lack intent, but yet has a large impact. I purchased my home and it was not in the historic district, so having my home be annexed into a into the historic district after purchase to me seems like a large overreach of government authority. I'm very concerned about the costs related to updating a home, stricter government regulations on what you can and cannot do. It's already a challenge to try to find people to do updates on your home. Now to have that extra layer of complexity only makes it more of a challenge. Additionally, while some appreciate a historic home, many individuals would not, and in turn that could affect property values because of restrictions related to this. The information about financial assistance is very vague. I find that very concerning as a homeowner. Again, the burden for maintaining a historic home typically falls unfairly on the property owner. And again, especially, I purchased my home, it was not in the historic district. I feel like this limits a property owner's control over their own property, the ability to not make decisions, but instead have to come and ask for permission. I feel is a overextension of government overreach. And I do feel that there is a lack of awareness and understanding on this plan. There's been things that have been sent out, but in terms of education, in terms of what this means, what this is, I think education on this has not been done its due diligence on this project. So I'm not in favor of it. You have beautiful homes that are registered in the historic district. I think it's fantastic. However, for those of us who have purchased our homes and they were not historic, I would leave it as is and let us have that autonomy over our domiciles. Thank you.
If I may ask real quick, ma'am, can you state your address again?
2025 Main Street.
Thank you.
Thanks.
My name is Ronald MacDonald. I live in 1909 Main Street. And the only thing I want to say right now is I ditto the previous speaker. I did not, nor would I want to, even after I purchased the house in Stevens Point here back 15 years ago, want to live in an association or any such item that controls my liberties to decide what I want to do with my property. And basically I have nothing too much else to say is other than if you want us to move out, fine, we can do that. Then you can be stuck with that property and try and find somebody to fulfill it after they find out what the covenants are. I think this is ludicrous.
Hi, my name is Robert Wilder. I live at 1726 Clark Street. It's a duplex at 1724 and 1726 Clark Street. I'm currently part of the Clark Street Historic District, but my property is non-historic. It was finished in 1993, but I still fall under the guidelines of a historic district. This has been a problem that was presented to me only recently when this change came about. Because I can assure you, had I known that I was in a historic district when I bought the property, I wouldn't have. Because honestly, it's tantamount to a government-sponsored HOA. As a non-historic property, I still have to request approval from a Historic Design Review Commission, which just doesn't make any sense to me. And if I fail to meet the requirements, I'm subject to a $200 a day penalty. So in addition to this being a problem for me personally, extending this to other areas of the city would not be appropriate at all. So I agree with the previous speakers that this plan should not move forward, and property owners should be allowed to make decisions on their own properties. Thank you.
My name is Dan Christ. I live at 1649 Clark Street. I'm going to have to echo many of the other people that live here. I think our street already looks beautiful without expanding it to other areas. You know, no one's buying a $500,000 house only to make it into something that's not already beautiful. I think as far as a lot of the other stuff that are in the plan, I think that a lot of it is really good, but to tell homeowners what they can and can't do, especially with like newer materials like composites and low maintenance things. I have 46 windows in my house. It's a big house. I've been fortunate enough to not have to need financial assistance with anything, but 46 windows is 46 windows. And if I'm subject to what kind of window, the prices can go crazy. It's probably going to cost me, if I have to re-side my house, I have vinyl right now, and it's been done in the past, but it'll have to be done again. I don't want to have to wonder if I'm going to have to take down the vinyl and use the wood that's already currently underneath it, because it is still there. I would prefer not to have to paint my house every 5 years, because I honestly, when I redid my windows, I reglazed all my windows. It took me 3 hours per window, and I have 46 of them. So it took basically all summer. I work full time. I try to maintain my house as well as I can, but it's just big, and I love my home. And I think, like everyone else, like we have beautiful homes in the area, and I don't think that we need more regulation to tell us that I can't put a composite deck on because it doesn't maintain the historical nature of my home when you couldn't even see it from the street. So, and that's all I have. Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay. So I'll declare the public hearing section closed, and I'll kick back to the commission. Move to accept.
Move to, it'd be either to recommend approval or denial.
Okay.
Or postponement. So you just ask for a motion.
May I ask a question on the document on the couple of members of the community had talked about an annex of, can you go over that? Because I don't think I understood it the way that they're describing it.
Yeah, I can go over. I think this was the first two speakers. Appreciate all the comments first and foremost. So the two properties off of Main Street, so those two properties do not fall within our local historic district. They're not within the Clark Street Historic District. However, your two properties do fall within the Main Street Clark Street Historic District that's only listed nationally as a historic district. What that means is, this commission, the city broadly speaking, has no say-so over if you want to put new windows in, if you want to repaint your siding. The one difference with being in a national historic district is the tax credit opportunities that exist. Now back as the reference to the annexation. So back in about, correct me if I'm wrong, Mark, maybe about 2017, 2018 or so, the city went through efforts to put the Main Street, Clark Street Historic District on the National Register. There's a specific process laid out through the State Historical Society in terms of what has to be met. One of them being that there has to be neighborhood meetings that the city did hold, really to get feedback from the residents impacted as part of that district nomination. The residents were not in favor of being listed on the National Register. Ultimately, that nomination request would have died on the spot. So I can't speak to those efforts just since that was prior to my time being at the city. I know you two, I'm sure a big reason why you two elected to attend this meeting is because you received a letter from me. The letter that I sent out was to folks who live within not only a local historic district, but also a national historic district, because there are some components of this plan, referencing the financial assistance programs that I want to make sure that folks within a national historic district are made aware of it and being able to provide comments. So again, it's not like the city, we as a commission would have any say-so as far as exterior improvements, since you're in a national historic district and not in a local historic district. I guess I can go over the other comments from the public hearing if
Yeah,
you want.
one of the thing was the way I read it earlier, and I agree with almost everything that was said. So that's why I would like it cleared up. We, as a commission, have already discussed materials is a big thing to us. And one of those is yet to be decided upon. I can't talk to it being approved at any time in the near future, but it 100% makes sense to some of us that better materials make sense, even in a historical perspective. So, but again, not been decided on.
Yeah, so just to piggyback off that, so the last commenter for the making reference to the design guidelines. So as you'll see in the next agenda item, there's a whole separate planning document, an architectural guideline handbook that outlines a whole slew of things under consideration for exterior improvements to a house. As Barry mentioned, there's been active conversations amongst this commission, one example being what type of roofing materials are allowed. Under our current architectural guidelines, if you have a asphalt shingle and you want to replace it, you want to reshingle it, you have to reshingle it with shingles as well. We've had a commission, we as a commission, at least indirectly, have brought up, well, could we allow for folks to install a metal roof, but it has etching and other characteristics in place so that it looks like shingles? That's a really valuable conversation talking about architectural guidelines. What I will say is that that's separate and away from this planning document. We have and we'll continue to make fine-tuned edits to our architectural guidelines because, at least in my opinion, I don't want to speak for the commission, but that's a living and breathing document. It's always subject and it always is allowed to be revised as needed. And then the other comment, Mr. Wilder, in reference to your property, 1724 and 1726 Clark Street. I agree with you. You made a good point in terms of your property, your building being classified as non-contributing. So back when the Main Street, Clark Street Historic District was put on the National Register, we had to have an outside consultant do a survey of every single property within that district. And what that consultant found out was that your building is classified as not contributing, meaning that it doesn't enhance, it doesn't support the district significantly when compared to all the other properties. Now, what a lot of cities have done, and this was in consultation with my representative from the state level through the Historic Preservation Office, what a lot of communities have done is to adopt a period of significance clause within their historic preservation ordinance, essentially saying if there is a building, an existing building that was constructed outside of the period of significance for that historic district, it would be allowed, it would be subject to a lot more lax requirements for any exterior improvements. So that's definitely something I'm willing to entertain, to revise that, to include language in our ordinance saying as such. Because I agree with you, if you have a duplex that was built in the 90s, you should be subject to a little bit more lenient, a little bit more flexible guidelines when compared to a house that's maybe 50, 75 years older. So, you know.
My argument being that I should be subject to the exact same guidelines as a duplex 2 blocks over. Which are like none. I mean, obviously the regular zoning and permit application requirements, but certainly not a historical review commission on a non-historical property.
Sure, appreciate it. So I'll come back to,
If I,
still have a well, I guess just for Robert's rules, we'll need a motion and a second first, just before we get
Discussion.
knee deep in discussion.
okay.
To begin discussion, I'll make the motion that we adopt the historic preservation plan as presented. We do need to have a motion and a second before we can start discussion. So in order for discussion to take place, I'll make that motion.
I'll second. I think the comment about, obviously, like the financial aid part and the education, it's something that I've brought up, that I think moving forward, I think that, it should be one of the things that should be, I think, done first, because I think that's one of the policy recommendations, if I remember correctly, and I think as it's been demonstrated tonight, I think that should be a definite priority is to make sure the education and the educating about financial resources and make that less vague and much more actionable. And I think that should be something that needs to be done quickly. And just talking with other people that I know who have lived in the historic district, not only the education about financial sources, but also talking about, working with the realtors so that they are understanding what houses and that sort of thing, so that they're letting people know that this is something that will need to, just something that I just think something that needs to be done. That's been definitely points been made, I think, on that front.
So is this an open discussion on the document? Okay. Just a point of interest. I read through this. Could be extremely daunting for anybody who's bought a home and, hey, so all of a sudden it's in a historic district. From the aspect that I've seen on the board, we want to work with the people. It's not just a, here you go, that's it, we're going to walk away. Would you say it's a living document?
Correct.
That means there's opportunities to change the document. I'd like to kind of stress that point, because if I was buying a $500,000 house and somebody come and said, you can't do anything but what I say, I would be really upset. But I don't think that's the case. I think maybe that was the case in the past, but there's language in here that is opening things up, and it's a long read, and some of it is pretty dry. But things of, and you'll see that if you stick around for the next part, which is an approval of some work being done. We do kind of look at it and see whether it works for the community as a whole. What that means is, yes, there are some problems, and I am a president of HOA. and I try and not make it feel like an HOA. Everybody has their own opinion, everybody has their own taste, and common sense is a relative term. So what you have as common sense is different from someone else. If there's a house that opens up or space that opens up on Main Street and someone wants to build container home housing there for the students, you probably would all agree that's not a great idea for the look of Main Street. But does that mean it's common sense? It's common sense to the guy who's going to make money off of it. So this is a living document. I understand that when you get a letter in the mail, that's really shocking. So I just wanted to throw that out there, that it's not just a drop this on the table and walk away kind of thing.
Well, and also this document is much more than just telling individuals what they can or can't do with their historic homes. This is acknowledging the history that we do have here, architecturally and culturally, in Stevens Point. It's looking back at the strong ethnic, cultural history that we have with the different people from the different countries that came and helped establish Stevens Point. It's acknowledging them, recognizing them. Where did the Polish people settle? Where did the German people and the Scandinavian and later on the Hmong and others? It's honoring them, acknowledging them. This document, the 100 pages of it, isn't just creating historic districts and mandating what people can or can't do with their homes. So much deeper and more powerful than that.
I guess my question is, does this document in and of itself create new historic districts?
No.
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 Nothing's being added. Nothing's being created by this document. This is just reflection of historic districts that are presently in place. It doesn't add onto any, there isn't any additional properties that are being put into here. I live in a home actually right next to Dan, and our block is in the,
Well, we're
in one, but not in the other. Because when we had our public meetings, we expressed a desire to be less restrictive, but to have access to the other, and that's what got created. Nothing was imposed. It was as a result of input at a public meeting. That was 5 years ago. So this doesn't create any new historic districts. This basically just explains what's presently in place and has a lot of historical perspective and explanations and background of things that have already happened. This isn't any, I mean, it's, and I understand the concerns. We expressed some of those same concerns 5 years ago. The other thing is there is within the existing process flexibility. There's things taken into consideration whether or not they're economically feasible. There's higher priority put on depending whether it's the facade or the back portion of a property, whether it's visible to the public. There's flexibility as far as what the neighborhood, what the neighboring structures are like, and whether or not it would fit in with that context. So there is some consideration. I'm going to also play devil's advocate. My son bought a nice house, has put a lot of time and effort into it, was looking at doing some more projects. A friend of his who's a realtor came and he said, so if I do this to the basement, will that make sense? He said, I'll be honest with you, because of the color that your neighbor painted his house, it's probably, whatever you put into it, you're probably not even going to get your money back. And so we all have to acknowledge that decisions that your neighbors make do also impact your property and vice versa. So part of this is just making sure, it's being good neighbors as well. This doesn't create anything that's not already in existence. this is just an explanation and just shows the maps of what's already in place. This isn't anything new.
That's not what's online. This is where there's confusion. So I'm looking at a map right now that says proposed historic district, and my home is in it.
That's
Right, but this,
So help me understand the
yeah,
education.
so
Yeah.
this document does not create that. Those are proposed, those are ones that will be considered in the future. This document does not approve those proposed. Those still are just proposed and are identified as proposed within the plan. They're not being approved by this plan.
And
Those are just historical areas that were identified when the survey was done and the expert came through and he said, he took a look at the city and said, these are some other areas that could be considered down the, this isn't the process for approving those. This is just stating those are some areas that were identified by the expert as saying ones that could be considered. But that's not the process we're going through. This isn't, we're not approving those as historic districts. That's not the intent of this document. This is just to say, these are areas that may be considered down the line. And historically, if the people that live in those districts don't want it to happen, it doesn't happen. And I can speak that from personal experience. We wanted to be in the one, but not in the other, and that's what happened.
And I'll just add real quick, the reference to the proposed historic districts. To piggyback what Mark mentioned, there's a whole process written out in our historic preservation ordinance to actually designate those as a local historic district. One of the things that I think was pretty eye-opening for the commission is that there's not a property owner consent requirement in place on the books right this very moment to say property owners within a proposed local historic district have to consent to that. One of the policy recommendations that we included in this plan is to say, yes, there should be property owner buy-in. Property owners should consent to being in a historic district because, frankly, that creates more educational gaps that you referenced earlier, and we don't want to be blunt, we don't want to jam a proposal down anyone's throats. We want there to be a buy-in from all of the property owners as part of that proposed district. So, yeah, I'll leave it at that.
In many ways, this codifies the fact that property owners have the opportunity to be heard and to weigh in. I mean, it's what's been done historically anyway, but this basically is one of the recommendations is for those meetings to have to take place and for the people's voices to be heard. So in some ways, this actually strengthens the property owner's position as opposed to in the past. In the past, if the city would want to, they could have just said, oh, yeah, we'll just make that, and wouldn't have necessarily even had to have any kind of a public hearing or anything. And this basically says that's what's going to be done. At least, would you agree with that?
Correct.
Yeah.
The idea that you can.
I think any more comments, we'll just have folks come up to the front.
Just for the people that are at home, and if there's anyone, or if the video, they want to view the video down the line, then they'll be able to hear the whole conversation.
Okay, so as I understand it, then this document that we're talking about today is specific to my property. And, right, so we're not talking about new districts, we're talking about existing districts, is that correct?
So this is talking about, this is in reference to our local historic districts as well as those listed on the National Register. There's components of the plan that would only impact national historic districts. One example being the tax credit opportunities, trying to find ways that we can improve outreach efforts to those property owners to say, hey, this financial resource exists. And some of these would apply only to those who live in a local historic district, like the reference to demolishing historic structures, let's just say.
So the reason I wanted to comment again is in response to something you had said regarding neighbors painting their houses a certain color, which speaks to exactly my concern with living in a National Historic District, and that the only reason my house is subject to review is to prevent my doing something a commission doesn't like. Because at no point can you maintain the historical integrity of a house that's not historic. Built in 1993, my duplex is made mostly out of MDF and plastic. It has no fine woodwork, no architectural significance. So ultimately, I'm subject to these guidelines for the sole purpose of controlling my decision-making in terms of design. You cannot regulate being a good neighbor. The color of your neighbor's house is what everyone in every neighborhood has to deal with. But only in certain neighborhoods are we controlling that. So really, who is this a benefit for?
Your neighbor?
My neighbor, but I didn't buy a house to benefit my neighbors.
I understand.
If my neighbors want to benefit from living next to me, we need to be good neighbors,
Right.
create a neighborhood, not be subject to government regulation on house color.
I guess my point is this document doesn't change any of that. This is there are things already, this doesn't put any additional houses into it, doesn't change the process or anything. This basically just explains things. Also, I think Adam has done an incredible job of taking all the different information from different places and putting it into one single document so it's easy to find answers in one, rather than having to go and search all the different areas. This is much more comprehensive, but this won't change the impact on your house one iota.
Right, and therein lies my concern.
So whether or not this passes won't impact your house.
It could change the impact on my house as other properties. If we wanted to have community buy-in, if people want this government funding, then they could ask for it and be subject to review. But you've mandated it, which is the problem.
This doesn't mandate anything. What's in place is already in place. This won't change
What we could.
any action.
What we could possibly look at is, as you're saying, separate from this this document. So you're saying like that variance of
The period of significance.
Yeah.
And that's something that, honestly, I'm have full support with changing that or adding that language in our ordinance. As I referenced earlier, in consultation with our state rep through the Historical Society, most communities have it. Frankly, I'm surprised as part of the statewide accreditation process that the city underwent a few decades ago that we were not required to place that language. Whose fault is that? I don't know, but I have no issue. I mean, if the commission consents to that, I have no issue with drafting up some language and bringing it before you folks for incorporation.
But that's not, would not be put in this document. That would be put in our.
That's
That would
exactly
basically be the charge of us as a commission if it's the next time we meet, for
Right,
example.
but
we'll have some
which
language.
document would that be included into?
the I
It would
think
just be, I guess,
ordinance.
The regular ordinances?
yeah.
Does that make sense, sir? To get a variance in the regular ordinances?
And this group has given variances in the past as well. For example, and you talked about paint color. There was a new building being constructed, and as part of the new building, it had metal roofing. Now, according to the guidelines, because it's in historical district, you're supposed to utilize colors from anytime you paint it, you have certain paint colors that you're able to choose from. There were some that were similar kind of to the color of the roofing, but it would look like he tried to match it and it didn't match. And so he came and presented, he said, this is the one that is on the thing. Here's one, it's not real different, but this would actually match. Can I use this color? And the commission said, of course. I mean, so there is flexibility. There's also within our existing structure the ability to appeal and those types of things. It's not, but I mean, I don't even know my 4+ years on council if we've ever had an appeal, because things have always been worked out at this level. So it's not like there's not a willingness to work with property owners. But ultimately, this is just an attempt to kind of put everything, an overall view. This doesn't change. This isn't creating anything new that's not already in existence. This is just a document that reflects everything as a whole, what is, and also does include things that we're hoping to do in the future as far as educational processes and those types of things as well. And looking at a lot of the groups that settled in, I mean, it's pretty comprehensive and talks about the whole process that we went through in creating this. So.
And also, if there is movement to add another like local historic district, it does put in place like that process to do that as well. So.
Sure. Oh, the public hearing's done. We probably shouldn't, but you're in charge.
So my name is Andrew Larson. I live at 2048 Dixon Street, and I'm not part of a historic district, but I do have a property that's been identified as historically significant, and I'm just wondering how a single property falls into this whole conversation.
Mm-hmm.
Good question. So we have, besides our local historic districts and our national historic districts, back in 2011, we, as Alderperson Christensen mentioned, we had a comprehensive survey of the city where an outside consultant surveyed every property to see basically is there historic value to it. And while districts as a whole were identified, there were also a scattering of individual properties that were deemed eligible for listing on the National Register of Historic Places. Some examples would be that of the brewery, a couple buildings over at UWSP, Century's main building off of North Point. So ultimately, those recipients received a letter from me as well stating that because your building is of historic value, you should be appraised of the information and the planning process in creating this. So really the purpose of a individual property, there's a process called a local landmark designation request that you could be subject to, or you could be identified locally as a historic building. Like the historic district nominations, the city can't unilaterally say an individual building must be subject to our rules. Ultimately, it would be the property owner who would have to petition this commission and the council to be designated. The last time that we've done that was the old Altenburg Dairy building off of Madison and Monroe Street, I think earlier this year, late last year. It's few and far between that happens, but again, it's ultimately the property owner's discretion as to if they want to be designated local.
Because it allowed them to then get some federal funds, correct?
Correct.
Yes,
Or
so that
be
was.
subject to more lenient building code standards.
Oh, yeah,
That as well.
both, yeah.
So to be clear, there won't be a historic district on Dixon Street.
Correct.
More than likely not.
Unless you want to be designated locally, but.
Maybe 100 years from now. I mean,
When would be the appropriate time to suggest that verbiage to be put into at another meeting? The
it
exception
would have to
Put
be put
into
on
this
an
plan?
agenda and everything, yeah.
agenda? Okay.
To be put into this plan, or
Not
just a
this plan,
directive
no.
separate from this
Separate.
plan? I'd say just a verbal, if the commission, if the consensus of the commission is yes, we want that, I'll take that as marching orders.
I would
too.
say that is to have an exemption for homes that are not historic in the historic district, to have certain leniencies for sure. That only makes sense.
So put that on the agenda for next month, and we can discuss it.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, sir?
How do you get that put into the plan?
So that would be put into the existing ordinance.
Right.
Rather than just a historical, this is what Stevens Point is, this is what we hope to continue to make our historic areas. This doesn't tell you you can't paint your house green.
Right,
The plan is not a directive.
right. This is just a plan. It doesn't have any real teeth to it. The ordinances are what determine what actually can and can't be
And we're
done.
suggesting that the ordinance get that
Right.
information that you're talking about.
Thank you.
And another thing that I think, is brought up here and before, I think, when it comes to tackling some of these policy recommendations and stuff like that, I think that that education and that financial help information definitely needs to be a high priority, and I think that should be
There are a number of
brought
things that
quickly.
there's a number of things we're taking a look at. For example, and I've attended some workshops and stuff, and we're not the only community that's struggling with this because things keep changing, and so you keep trying to anticipate. One of them is solar energy, and on south-facing facades, how do you, there's really only one good place for them to be, and that's facing south. And yet, that may be the facade that faces towards the street, and so then it is subject to these things. So, do you make some kind of guidelines and trying to make it less obtrusive, or do you? And I heard that same topic coming up in other communities as well. It's a struggle. You have a balancing act that you take a look at in a number of these decisions. You want to encourage people to be energy conscious as well and environmentally conscious, but you also want to try to do it in a way that maintains things. So it's really challenging, but I do think this commission as a whole has done a good job of common sense balancing of those issues.
So,
More discussion or then put it up to a vote.
all right, so any more discussion?
Nope.
Okay, so yeah, definitely, I think it'd be good to definitely add that verbiage to the ordinance, and then work on the education part of this. So, with that said, I'll move to.
No, we have a motion.
We have the motion made.
Oh, yeah.
And a second.
Time to
Sorry.
vote.
Okay, so I'm sorry. All those in favor of accepting the preservation plan, say.
Recommending approval.
For all those in favor of recommending approval of the Stevens Point Historic Preservation Plan, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? All right.
You can vote, Janet. I don't know if I heard you.
I said it real quietly.
Okay.
Because I wasn't sure.
Okay. You're good.
Being the alternate.
Yes.
All right, so then I will move to item number 4, a request from Matthew Lansing, representing Lansing Revocable Trust, for a design review to construct a covered deck on the north elevation of the principal structure located at 2124 Clark Street.
All right, bear with me while I get to the right page here. So as the chair mentioned, the applicant is proposing to construct roughly about a 500 square foot deck on the rear of the building at 2124 Clark Street. Just for context, I'm going to zoom in here. So we're at this property is on the far east end of the Clark Street Historic District. Fremont Street is right here. That is the easternmost boundary of the district. So the proposal is, I'm just going to skim to, here we go. A rendering is to construct this roughly 500 square foot deck on the rear of the house. About half of it, the west half, will be open to the sky. The east half would be covered as shown in the renderings included in the packet. So just a little Spark Notes version going into the details here. Some of the amenities that are proposed are to have this roof overhang with a similar roof pitch to that of the second floor of the house. Ultimately, the reason why this request has to go before you folks is not only for the installation of this back porch, but also because of the changes in roof features that are going to be proposed by way of this covered portion. Other amenities would include the masonry chimney on the far east side of the house. You can see on the bottom here that on the bottom of the chimney also retains the stone base foundation. I think this was pretty integral, as you can see through the site photos, that the first foot and a half of the house does all around this north-facing wall has this stone foundation. So trying to incorporate that into the proposed chimney adds a little bit of a retains that architectural feature to the house. Another thing that, at least when reviewing this request, that I found appropriate is that, you know, most decks you see have some sort of a lattice type skirt around the base of the deck. This keeps that open so that if you're situated on the far end, as far deep into the lot as you can go, depending on how much lighting exists, you can still see that stone foundation looking towards the deck. So you're still retaining, you're still trying to keep visible some of the more architecturally significant features of this house. Other components, again, stairs leading up to the deck, pretty straightforward. There is also a tempered glass railing along the deck itself. As I mentioned in the staff report, if this deck would have been on the front facade, you know, I'd have a little bit of hesitation towards that. Our architectural guidelines does not necessarily reference the use of glass as a feature to a deck or porch. So with this deck being on the back of the house, away, shielded from public view, there's a little bit more of a flexibility, a little bit more of openness that I have with using glass as part of the scope of work. So ultimately, within the packet, as well as some supporting details, the application itself, some other plans provided by the architect supporting the property owner who is here in person as well. Staff's recommendation is to approve the request subject to the conditions included in the packet, pretty straightforward conditions. I guess lastly I'll say is if there's any questions, as I mentioned, the architect supporting the owner, property owner, is here and should be able to answer those as well. So with that, I'll kick it over to you, Chair.
I gotta move to accept, right?
Yeah, there'll be a motion to approve second and then discussion.
Okay. All right, so I move to accept the request from Matthew Lansing. Do I have a second?
I will second it.
All righty, discussion?
I guess looking at the proposal as a whole, it's very thorough. I'm impressed with the homeowners and the architects' care. They're matching the existing corbels. They're matching the type of brick. They're trying to match the same pitch as the dormer and the existing roof. So I think there's a lot of care being taken to try to maintain some of the architectural continuity.
I just think the aesthetic that they put up it matches the existing structure, and that's all that I think really, that's one of the driving decision things on the board here is it doing justice to the aesthetic of the house, and I think it certainly is. It was very thoughtful.
I guess I concur with Adam's thoughts. I'm not sure if it was a front facade, whether or not the tempered glass would have necessarily been in keeping, but I think in this setting on the back side and where it's not visible from the street or the sidewalk, I don't have a problem with it.
We'll have one of you two.
Okay. Thank you. My name is Ginger Keemer. I'm the alderperson for District 3, and as being alder for the neighborhood, I received these plans prior to them being put in the packet, just so I'm aware of what's happening in the neighborhood. And I'm just here to voice my support, which seemingly you all have, but it just seems like a really stunning project. So I just wanted to come and show my support for the project. Thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah, my name is Rick Whip at 2016 Main Street, and just a quick question. Does the roof line tie into the house at all?
I'll defer to Phil.
Can you come to the microphone?
Yes.
Looks like it's on the face, exclusively.
My name is Phil DeSalvo with Grunwald and Halverson. No, to answer your question, no, the roof does not physically attach to the rear of the house. It's I submitted some other views of it, but the canopy is just supported by 4 independent columns. The roof actually stops short of the house by, well, it will stop short of the house by a certain number of inches. So physically, it will not be attached. If that answers your question.
Good.
I just want to say I really appreciate the thoroughness of the plans. I mean, there's very little left to it. It's very clear, so.
All right, so I am going to call for a vote. All those in favor say aye.
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 All those against? All right. So,
Just say we stand adjourned at 5:57.
all right, so we stand adjourn at 5:57.
A video of this meeting is available for viewing on the city's website, stevenspoint.com/videos.